For more on that story, we're now joined in studio by Jessica Lawrence, head of the Johannesburg Law Clinic at Lawyers for Human Rights, Refugee and Migrant Rights Program. Hello, Jessica, and thank you for your time on the SABC News Desk.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Now, you've raised some concern on how those raids were conducted in the first place. What worries you about those raids, Jessica?
So I think it's important to have a correct narrative, which is portrayed to the public. So we've seen the narrative in the media at the moment, and the narrative which is certainly being portrayed by police and high-level politicians is that over 500 or even 600 illegal migrants have been detained and counterfeit goods have been confiscated. So it's important that we don't collapse all migrants into the category of illegal migrants, and similarly that we don't collapse all goods into the category of counterfeit goods. So what we are seeing from the raids is that a number of foreign nationals have been indiscriminately arrested on the basis of them just being foreign. We have had reports from community leaders as well as some of our clients that they have been arrested upon being able to present a permit, whether that is an asylum seeker permit, a refugee permit, a permanent residence ID, and police are detaining them notwithstanding the fact that they have their permits and have presented their permits. There are also other reports in that police have torn up people's asylum seeker or refugee permits and have detained these individuals. So certainly the police are entitled to do investigations into counterfeit goods, but these investigations need to be done in a procedurally fair and legal manner. And what we are seeing currently is that many people have just been arrested on the basis of being foreign.
All right. And what sort of legal recourse now would be available to migrants or refugees in this kind of situation, Jessica?
So certainly an individual has the right to be brought before court within 48 hours of being arrested. And that 48-hour period is yet to lapse. So it would really only be after that 48-hour period, exactly, where people would be entitled to some form of recourse for unlawful detention.
All right. What is the legal status of refugees and migrants within a human rights context today at this juncture in our country, Jessica?
So migrants within South Africa, particularly asylum seekers and refugees, are incredibly vulnerable, and often people flee their home countries due to persecution on the basis of political opinion, gender, sexual orientation, as well as war. So people come to South Africa as seeking protection from the South African state and then apply for asylum and go through a process of status determination to become a recognized refugee. While people are within South Africa as either asylum seekers or refugees, they are entitled to work and study in South Africa. And what we've seen is that a large number of asylum seekers and refugees are within the informal job sector and play
contributing
a vital
to the informal
role.
economy.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Play a vital role in contributing to the informal economy through being traders within the Joburg inner city.
All right. Jessica, our country has some of the very best asylum laws on the globe right now.
Yes.
We don't have an encampment policy, so we don't have refugee camps for foreign nationals. And then the UNHCR commended the country for being a leader on the continent as refugees are able to be granted the right to live and work here and study, in fact. But the applications for refugee status is still such a big hurdle. Why is that? Is the process just too codified, too lengthy, or is it just riddled with administrative problems? What can you tell us?
Yes, there certainly is a large amount of administrative barriers within the system, and there are huge amounts of backlogs. So an asylum seeker is supposed to be a temporary status.
All right.
And you are supposed to move on to refugee status determination relatively quickly. But what we are seeing is that large amounts of people who have applied for asylum have been waiting 10, 15 years to be recognized as refugees. And as you said, South Africa does have a great policy which is inclusive with regards to asylum seekers and refugees, which promotes integration of asylum seekers and refugees into the South African society and economy. And there was a study which was conducted in 2017 by the Johannesburg inner city partnership, which showed that within the Joburg inner city, the contribution that migrant traders have to the economy is approximately 10 billion rand. And so not only do asylum seekers and refugees and migrant traders contribute significantly to the society, it's important that they are offered such protections and are allowed to integrate, given that they cannot return to their home countries for fear of persecution or war. But in addition to that, they do meaningfully and substantially contribute to South Africa and its economy.
All right. On that note, migrants who are not genuine refugees but are seeking jobs or economic opportunities, trying to regularize their stay in the country, Jessica, how has this impacted on the refugee status determination process in your experience?
So certainly people who do not fall within what the definition of a refugee or an asylum seeker is would not be recognized or qualify for refugee status.
Can you just differentiate between the two for us?
Sure. So an asylum seeker is someone who has applied for asylum and is waiting for status determination to be recognized as a refugee. And that process does take quite a long time. Refugees have already gone through the process and have been recognized as refugees and are given that status, which is a more permanent status than that of an asylum seeker.
All right, so we've seen 5 billion rand being spent on trying to deport foreign nationals back to their home country. How and where do you think we should spend this money more effectively?
So I think it's important to create systems within the informal job sector, taking into consideration the significant contribution it makes to our economy. And rather than conducting raids in a manner as we've seen in the past week and last week, it's important to rather have better procedures at ports of entry, where you have customs officials which are looking at the goods which are entering into the country. So improve those systems and ensure that those officials are conducting their job in a manner which is legally correct and lawfully procedural, rather than conducting raids within the Joburg city, as we have seen, which has resulted in the violation of many rights of migrants who aren't necessarily illegal.
Just from your experience, Jessica, how many of these complaints or cases will actually make it to court? And if they're lucky enough to get there, what are the barriers to successful prosecution at this point?
So everyone is entitled to be brought before court within the 48-hour period. So everyone that is currently detained will need to be brought before a magistrate, which administratively and logistically will be very difficult, but will have to be done because it's everyone's constitutional right. Those who are not released and are in possession of valid documentation would have the right to be represented and taken to court on the basis of being unlawfully detained. The difficulty is not a lot of people cannot afford legal representation, and therefore legal representation would need to be provided for them through either legal aid or any non-profit or pro bono lawyers.
Jessica Lawrence, thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk. That was Jessica Lawrence from Lawyers for Human Rights joining us on the SABC News Desk.
Thank you.
Well, let's move on.